I planned the perfect first-class trip to Paris for my parents. But when I arrived to pick them up, they stood there with my jobless sister and her mooching boyfriend. My mother smiled and said, "We've decided Chloe will go in your place. She needs a vacation." They thought they were swapping my ticket for a free ride. They had no idea that by replacing me, they had just canceled their entire life-changing inheritance. Before I tell you exactly what happened when they landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport with no hotel and no return tickets, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button if you know what it feels like to be the scapegoat who finally gets the last laugh. I checked my watch. 10 a.m. The black luxury SUV I'd ordered pulled up precisely in front of my parents' house in the Atlanta suburbs. I stepped out, adjusting the blazer of my suit. My name is Jade Washington. I'm 34 and I run brand strategy for billion-dollar companies in New York. My entire life is planned to the minute. This trip, a luxurious one-week vacation for me and my parents, was no exception. 3 first-class tickets on Air France to Paris, a presidential suite at the 5-star Le Bristol Hotel. The front door opened. My father David stepped out first, looking nervous. My mother Sharon followed, wearing a brand new hat. And then my stomach tightened. My sister Chloe, 31, walked out right behind them. She was dragging a massive, obviously fake Louis Vuitton suitcase. Following her was her deadbeat white boyfriend Scott Miller, pulling a matching bag. My mother saw the look on my face. She gave me that smile, the one I knew all too well. It was the smile she used right before she was about to take something that was mine. "Jade, dear," her voice was sickly sweet. "We have wonderful news. We've decided to bring Chloe along." I kept my voice perfectly flat. "Bring her along. I only booked 3 tickets. Me, Mom, and Dad." My mother Sharon let out a small, condescending laugh. "No, sweetie. I mean, we decided Chloe is going instead of you." She didn't even bother to lower her voice. "Your sister has been under so much stress lately, she really needed some rest. You're always working in New York anyway. It doesn't matter if you go or not." I turned my gaze to Chloe, the family's golden child, 31 years old, the one who had never managed to hold a single job for more than 6 months. She immediately put on her practiced pouting face. "That's right, sis," she whined, her voice high and childish. "You go to Paris all the time, don't you? You work at that fancy company in New York. You have so many opportunities." She gestured wildly. "I haven't even been out of the state of Georgia. Why can't you just let me have this one time? Just be nice for once." Scott, the opportunist boyfriend, immediately draped his arm over Chloe's shoulder, pulling her close. "She's right, Jade," he said, using that overly familiar tone I hated. "Family is about sharing, you know. And Chloe really deserves this. She's earned a break after all that hard work job hunting." Hard work job hunting. The laugh almost escaped my lips. His idea of job hunting was scrolling through his phone on my parents' sofa while my mother brought him snacks. I had to physically restrain myself from rolling my eyes. I ignored them both and turned to the one person who could have stopped this. The one person who was supposed to be my father. Dad. My father. David Washington suddenly found his shoes fascinating. He looked down at them, then up at the sky, then at a car passing down the street. He looked anywhere and everywhere except at my face. His silence was his answer. "Come on, kid," he finally mumbled, shuffling his feet on the pavement. "Your mother, she has a point. It's just a trip. You can just let your sister go, can't you?" The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was filled with 22 years of the same betrayal. 22 years of me being the black sheep, the scapegoat, the one who was too serious, too ambitious, too different. 22 years of being the invisible child only seen when the bills were due. I wasn't just Jade. I was the family ATM. And all the while Chloe was the princess, the delicate flower who could not possibly be expected to work or take responsibility for her own life. They all stood there staring at me. My mother with her smug look of victory, Chloe with her impatient entitlement. My father with his familiar shame. They were waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for me to yell, to plead, to break down and cry, just like I used to when I was 15. They were waiting for the drama. I took a slow, deep breath, letting it out evenly. I looked at each of them one by one. Then I smiled. It was a small, tight smile, the kind of cold smile that does not come anywhere near your eyes. "Okay," I said. Instantly, the tension on Chloe's and Sharon's faces melted away. Chloe actually clapped her hands, bouncing on her toes like a child. "Yes, this is amazing," she shrieked, her voice grating on my nerves. "I knew you'd do the right thing, Jade. You're the best sister ever. Scott, we're going to Paris." "Hold on," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through her celebration like a knife. I raised a single hand, and the premature victory party stopped. Scott's arm froze midway to hugging Chloe. "I said I agree," I continued. I turned my back on them and walked calmly to the open door of the black SUV. I reached inside and pulled out my leather briefcase. I placed it on the hood of the car. From inside, I pulled out a sleek, dark blue folder embossed with the Air France logo. I held up the 3 printed ticket confirmations. "But there is a small detail you seem to have overlooked." I looked at my mother. "These are 3 first-class tickets. The names on them are Jade Washington, David Washington, and Sharon Washington. I will call Air France right now." I pulled out my phone. "And I will cancel my ticket." Chloe lunged forward, her eyes wide, grabbing at the folder. "Oh, that's easy," she said, laughing with relief. "Don't cancel it. Just call them and change the name on your ticket to my name, Chloe Washington. It's simple, right?" I pulled the folder back just out of her snatching reach. I looked her dead in the eye. My voice dropped, becoming as cold and sharp as the New York wind in February. "No, Chloe, I cannot do that." Her hand stopped in midair. "What? What do you mean?" "This is a special invitational fare. It is strictly non-transferable. I cannot change the name. The airline's rules are very clear. I can only cancel my seat." The gleeful, greedy smile froze on Chloe's face. Her mouth was half open. She looked like a statue. I then turned my gaze slowly to my mother. Sharon's face was a mask of confusion, like she was trying to solve a math problem that was just beyond her understanding. "So, Mom," I said, keeping my tone polite, "now we have 2 first-class tickets for you and Dad, and I am no longer going, which means, how exactly is Chloe getting to Paris?" Dead silence. The only sound was a lawnmower from a house down the street. Sharon and Chloe just stared, their faces completely blank, the reality of the situation crashing down on them. Scott looked back and forth between us, his simple brain finally realizing this was not a simple transaction. The first hook was set, the first thread was pulled. Now I would sit back and watch them try to solve the very first problem they had created. I did not say another word. I simply turned, got into the private Escalade I had hired for myself, and closed the door with a quiet, solid click. I told the driver to take me to the St. Regis Hotel in Buckhead. I was not going to the airport with them. I did not need to. I knew exactly what was happening. I could picture the entire scene as if I were standing right there with them. I could see them rushing into the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, Chloe already complaining about having to carry her own fake designer bag. They would hurry to the Air France Sky priority counter, pushing past other passengers with that familiar sense of entitlement my mother always carried. My mother Sharon would be the one to speak, pushing her 2 passports toward the check-in agent, a professional-looking African-American woman in her 40s with a polite, practiced smile. "Check in for these 2. My mother would command, "and I need to purchase 1 more first-class ticket to Paris, on this flight, right now." I could see the agent typing, her smile remaining in place as her eyebrows shot up. "Of course, ma'am. Let me check." A few more keystrokes. "All right, a last-minute, same-day first-class ticket to Paris will be $14,500. My mother's arrogant smile would freeze on her face. Chloe, standing right behind her, would gasp. "What, 14,000? Yes, ma'am. The agent would continue, her voice still perfectly pleasant. And just so you know that flight is now full in first and business class. We do have one seat remaining on the aircraft. It is a middle seat in economy. That price is $3,800. They would just stand there stunned into silence. $14,500. That was more than my father made in 3 months of hard work at his middle management job. My mother would be the first to recover. I knew her playbook. She would turn her eyes narrowing to the weakest link. "Scott," she would hiss, "where is Chloe's boyfriend? You're a man, handle this. Pay for her ticket." Scott would turn pale, his hands instantly raising in surrender. "Sharon, I can't," he would stammer. "My card, it only has a $5,000 limit." Just as I had predicted. Right on cue, my phone lit up, vibrating silently on the plush leather seat beside me. The caller ID simply read, "Mom." I let it ring twice. Then I calmly picked it up and put it on speakerphone in the quiet, climate-controlled car. "Hello. Jade." The voice that came through the speaker was not my mother's. It was a raw, unfiltered shriek. "You have to fix this. You have to fix this right now. Chloe's ticket is too expensive. Send the money. You did this on purpose. You're trying to humiliate your sister." I was already in my suite at the St. Regis, pouring a glass of sparkling Perrier. The driver had taken my bags. The room was silent, peaceful, and cool. I placed the phone on the marble countertop and hit the speaker button. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" My mother's voice shrieked, the chaotic noise of the airport terminal buzzing behind her. "You set us up. You were trying to trick your own family." I took a small sip of my water before answering. "I told you, Mom," I replied calmly. "It was an invitational fare. I was planning to use 300,000 of my own airline miles. Miles I saved for 8 years just to upgrade your 2 tickets to first class with me. Now that I've canceled my seat, those upgrade points are gone." That was the lie I had prepared. The real truth was much, much bigger. "I don't care about your stupid miles," she screamed. "Your sister is standing here crying. She's humiliated." "Crying," I said, my voice suddenly losing all its warmth. All the feigned politeness vanished. "Mom, I remember being 19 years old. I worked double shifts all summer at a Waffle House, the night shift, to save $8,000 for my housing deposit for New York University. You found the cash I'd hidden in my room, and you took all of it." The other end of the line went completely silent. I could only hear the faint echo of an airport announcement. "You took my college money." I continued, my voice low and steady, "to pay off Chloe's credit card debt. She had stolen Dad's card and spent it all at the Lenox Square Mall. Do you remember what you told me when I confronted you? When I was sobbing knowing I was about to lose my spot at NYU. I heard her take a sharp, ragged breath. She remembered. "You told me, Jade, you're the smart one. You'll figure it out and earn it back. Your sister, she's fragile. She can't handle stress like you can." The silence stretched on, heavy and toxic. "I am not sending you $15,000, I said, my voice firm and final. "But I will send you $3,800. That is the price for the very last economy seat on that plane. That is your only option. Take it or Chloe stays home. It's your choice." Suddenly I heard a scuffle, and Chloe's voice, raw with fury, came on the line. "You're a selfish bitch. You always have been. That was Dad's money anyway. You get to be rich, you're supposed to pay us back, you owe us." "Goodbye, Chloe," I said. I hung up the phone. I opened my banking app. I transferred exactly $3,800 to my mother's checking account with the memo, "Chloe's ticket." The trap was set. The next phase of their vacation was about to begin. I could almost feel my mother's hand shaking as she looked at the bank notification for $3,800. Scott, the boyfriend, clearly let out a visible sigh of relief, happy that he was not the one spending $5,000 on his supposed girlfriend. My mother, fuming, snatched the receipt from the counter. They bought the last economy ticket for Chloe. But the real drama, the real humiliation was only just beginning. The scene on the airplane itself would be the next act. I could picture my parents, David and Sharon, holding their new first-class boarding passes. They would turn left at the plane door, stepping into the hushed, luxurious cabin. A flight attendant would be there to greet them by name, offering them champagne or orange juice in a real glass before takeoff, handing them a warm towel. They would settle into their private pod seats that could lie completely flat, covered in soft bedding. Then there was Chloe. Gripping her 3,000, she would have to walk past the first-class cabin, seeing my parents sipping their champagne. She would walk past the business-class cabin, past premium economy, and keep walking. And walking, all the way to the back of the plane, to row 42, seat E, the middle seat. She would be crammed between a large man who was already snoring before the plane even took off, and another passenger who was coughing non-stop into a handkerchief. Chloe, who had never flown anywhere but in the front, who was used to my parents catering to her every whim, would be completely stunned. She would look at the tiny cramped seat, the lack of legroom, the scratchy blanket in its plastic bag. She simply could not accept this reality. This was not the glamorous Paris vacation she had stolen. A new hook was now set. The conflict of class and privilege played out at 35,000 feet was about to erupt. Of course, Chloe did not stay seated. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, she unbuckled, pushed past the two passengers in her row, and stormed up the aisle. She marched all the way through premium economy, through the galley, and yanked back the curtain to the first-class cabin. There, my parents were already sipping pre-departure champagne I had pre-ordered for them, looking slightly uncomfortable in their plush pods. "I am not sitting back there," Chloe announced, her voice echoing through the quiet, refined cabin. "It smells, and the man next to me is disgusting." My mother, Sharon, immediately looked flustered. "Oh, Chloe, honey, just sit for a little while." "No," Chloe snapped. She saw a flight attendant approaching and flagged him down. "Excuse me, I'd like a glass of champagne. And I need you to move me. My parents are here." She pointed at Mom and Dad. The flight attendant, a polite man, glanced at her boarding pass, which she was still clutching. "Ma'am, I am sorry, but this cabin service is only for our first-class passengers. I will have to ask you to return to your assigned seat in economy." Chloe's eyes narrowed. And then she did exactly what I knew she would do. She played her trump card, the one she always used when she did not get her way. "Is it because I'm black?" she asked, her voice suddenly loud, dripping with accusation. "Is that the problem? You gave them champagne?" She pointed at my parents, who are also black. "But you won't give me one. Are you racist? Is that what this is? You won't let me sit with my own family because I'm a black woman." The entire cabin went silent. My father sank lower in his seat, his face turning red. The flight attendant looked stunned. Before he could even respond, another figure appeared. A man in a sharply tailored suit. The purser, the head flight attendant, clearly French. He did not look intimidated at all. "Mademoiselle," he said, his voice calm but ice-cold. "I am the chief purser of this flight. Your ticket is for seat 42E. You are currently in a cabin you did not pay for, and you are interfering with the duties of the flight crew before takeoff. This is a violation of international air safety regulations." He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He stated facts. "Return to your seat, now, or you will be removed from this aircraft, and we will have you met by security upon arrival in Paris." Chloe stared at him, her mouth open. She looked for my mother to defend her, but my mother was silent, terrified of the purser. Defeated and humiliated, Chloe spun around and stomped all the way back to the rear of the plane, her face a mask of pure fury. That scene with the purser was just the opening act. The main performance was about to begin. My mother, Sharon, hearing the commotion and seeing Chloe get reprimanded, she kicked off her shoes right there in the aisle, unbuckled her seatbelt, and stormed out of her first-class pod. She ran past the purser down the galley and into the economy cabin to find Chloe, who was now dramatically sobbing into her hands in the middle seat. "What did you say to her?" my mother shrieked, rounding on the nearest flight attendant. "What did you do to my daughter?" The flight attendant, seeing the situation escalating, tried to de-escalate. "Ma'am, your daughter is fine. We just asked her to return to her assigned seat." Assigned seat? My mother's voice rose to a level that was truly impressive. Passengers throughout the cabin were now pulling off their headphones, their movie screens forgotten. "This is how you treat people. You humiliate a young woman. How dare you? How dare you treat my daughter like this?" She was in full performance mode now, the outraged matriarch. "Do you have any idea who my husband is?" she yelled, pointing back toward the first-class cabin where my father was. I was certain, pretending to be fast asleep. "Do you know who we are? We paid for this flight." That last part was technically true. I had paid. The entire cabin was staring. The flight attendants were now forming a professional, unmovable wall. The French purser reappeared, his face like thunder. Just as he was about to speak, the pilot's voice boomed over the public address system. "This is the captain speaking. We are aware of a passenger disturbance in the main cabin. We must remind all passengers that interfering with a flight crew in the performance of their duties is a federal offense. Flight attendants have full authority on this aircraft. Any passenger failing to comply with crew instructions will be restrained and met by law enforcement upon arrival." The message was clear. It was not a request. It was a final warning. The threat of actual police, of actual consequences, finally pierced her bubble of entitlement. She looked at the purser. He just stared back, unblinking. She was publicly, completely defeated. Without another word, she turned and marched back to first class, her bare feet slapping angrily on the carpet. Chloe, seeing her mother abandon her, let out a fresh wail of despair, but finally slumped down into her middle seat. My mother dropped back into her pod, aggressively snapping her blanket open and turning her face to the wall, shooting poisonous glares at any other passenger who dared to look her way. The luxurious trip to Paris had officially become an 8-hour public torture session, and they were only just getting started. My father David pretended to be asleep in his luxurious lie-flat pod. He had pulled the privacy screen up, but he was not sleeping. He was completely. The scene his wife and daughter had caused was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He was a simple man, a middle manager at a paper company. He was not used to this level of public confrontation. He was proud of Jade, so proud it sometimes ached, but he was a weak man. He was terrified of his wife's temper and his younger daughter's emotional meltdowns. And now, sitting on this ridiculously expensive seat that Jade had paid for, he could not escape his own memories. The guilt was suffocating. He remembered her graduation from New York University, 12 years ago. Jade was the first person in their entire extended family to graduate from a school like that, a top-tier, world-renowned university. She had called them, her voice shaking with excitement, to tell them she was graduating summa cum laude with the highest honors. She had paid for it all. After my mother had taken her Waffle House savings, Jade had taken out a mountain of student loans and worked 3 different jobs while maintaining a perfect grade point average. She had mailed them 4 tickets to the graduation ceremony at Yankee Stadium. David had wanted to go. He had dreamed of seeing his daughter, his brilliant firstborn, walk across that stage. But Sharon had scoffed. She'd tossed the invitation onto the kitchen counter like it was junk mail. "I'm not going all the way to New York City for that," she'd said. "It's the same weekend as Chloe's 19th birthday, and she wants a pool party." David had tried to argue weakly. "Sharon, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. She's graduating with honors." Sharon had turned on him, her eyes flashing. "And who is going to grill the barbecue, David? Who is going to set up the tables? Your daughter is having a party for all her friends. Are you going to abandon her just so Jade can feel important for 5 minutes?" So David had stayed home. He had stood in their backyard in the hot Atlanta sun, grilling hamburgers and hot dogs for Chloe and her noisy friends. He had missed his daughter's graduation. He had never seen her in her cap and gown. He had never seen her accept the honors she had worked so hard to earn all by herself. A flight attendant quietly slipped a glass of champagne onto his armrest. He picked up the cold, delicate flute. He took a long sip of the expensive French champagne. It tasted bitter. It tasted exactly like regret. My father's feigned sleep was not restful. The expensive champagne in his stomach felt like acid churning with the guilt of another even sharper memory. It was 2 years ago. The phone had rung on a Tuesday night. He picked it up. "Dad?" It was Jade, and her voice was electric, vibrating with a kind of pure joy he had not heard since she was a little girl. "Dad, I got it. They just told me I got the promotion. I'm the new director of strategy." David's heart had swelled with a pride that was almost painful. He knew what this meant. He knew the hours she put in, the weekends she sacrificed. She was the youngest director in the company's history. She was the only African-American woman to ever reach that level in her division. "That's my girl," he had whispered, his eyes stinging. "That's my brilliant girl. I'm so proud of—" But before he could even get the words out, a loud theatrical wail erupted from the next room. Chloe. Of course it was Chloe. She had just been fired. Again. This was her 5th job in 2 years. This time she'd been caught stealing office supplies, petty things like staplers and bulk packages of pens. Sharon, his wife, hearing Jade's happy voice on the phone and Chloe's crying in the bedroom, marched into the living room, her face a mask of pure fury. She ripped the phone right out of David's hand before he could even speak. "Jade! Stop bragging!" Sharon had snapped into the receiver. David just stood there, frozen, his hands still in the air. He heard Jade's small, tinny voice reply, confused. "What bragging, Mom? I was just sharing my— Your sister is in real pain right now." Sharon cut her off, her voice dripping with ice. "She just lost her job, but you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Since you're such a big shot director now, making all that money, you can start sending $2,000 a month home. Your sister is struggling. She wasn't lucky like you." Lucky. David had stared at the wall, the word echoing in his head. Lucky. Jade had not been lucky. She had been dedicated. She had been focused. She had been brilliant. Chloe had been lazy and entitled. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It was not a pause. It was a void, a cold, complete disconnect. Then Jade's voice came back, but the light, the joy, all of it was gone. It was flat, empty, professional. "Okay, Mom. I understand. I have another meeting I have to get to." And she hung up. From that day on, Jade never called to share her achievements again. My father shifted in his pod, the ultra-soft bedding suddenly feeling like a bed of nails. He finally understood. This trip, this ridiculous, over-the-top first-class experience. It was not Jade showing off. It was not her rubbing her success in their faces. It was Jade, his firstborn, trying one last desperate time to connect. To share the world she had built for herself, by herself. To invite them in, to let them be a part of it. And the very first moment they were tested, the very first moment they had to choose between Jade's incredible hard-won generosity and Chloe's predictable selfish tantrum, they had chosen Chloe. Instantly. Without the lights in the cabin brightened for the dinner service. In first class, the purser who had earlier reprimanded Chloe approached my mother with a warm smile. "Mrs. Washington, the lobster thermidor you pre-ordered." My mother beamed. This was what she was expecting. A flight attendant unfolded a heavy linen napkin and placed it in her lap, then set down a porcelain plate holding a perfectly cooked lobster tail bathed in a rich, creamy sauce. Another attendant poured her a large glass of an expensive French Chardonnay. She picked up the real heavy metal fork and knife and took her first bite. She closed her eyes in ecstasy. This was the treatment she deserved. This was what Jade owed her. My father, on the other hand, just stared at his own identical plate. The rich smell of the lobster made his stomach churn with guilt. He saw the memory of Jade's graduation, of her excited voice on the phone. He pushed the food around his plate. Far behind them, in the back of the plane, the heavy economy cart rumbled to a stop at row 42. Chicken or pasta? The tired flight attendant barked, not even looking at Chloe. What? Chloe snapped. Chicken or pasta? I guess chicken, Chloe mumbled, disgusted. The flight attendant slapped a hot rectangular aluminum foil tray onto her plastic table. It came with a small, cold bread roll in a plastic wrapper and a tiny cup of water. Chloe peeled back the foil. A puff of steam revealed a dry, gray-looking piece of chicken sitting on a solid, congealed brick of yellow rice. 3 limp boiled carrot slices were stuck to the side. The entire thing smelled like wet cardboard. This was the final insult. She knew what her parents were eating. She knew they were sipping champagne and eating real food, and she was given this prison food. She turned to the woman in the aisle seat, the one who had been coughing. "Can you believe this garbage?" Chloe hissed, jabbing her plastic fork at the chicken. "They charged $3,000 for this." The woman, who just wanted to be left alone, sighed and put on her headphones. "It's airplane food, honey. It's not supposed to be good." "No," Chloe said, her voice rising, forcing the woman to hear her. "This is abuse. My parents are in first class right now eating lobster. This is what they give me. This is racist." The woman just closed her eyes, trying to block her out. This only made Chloe angrier. "Are you deaf? I'm talking to you. You think this is okay?" The passenger in the window seat, the large man who had been snoring, woke up. "Lady, shut up," he grumbled. "Some of us are trying to sleep." Chloe gasped, completely outraged that anyone would dare speak to her that way. She was about to scream when the cabin lights dimmed once more, signaling the end of the miserable meal service. Later in the flight, after the trays were cleared and the cabin was dark, my father could not stand the guilt any longer. He leaned across the aisle to my mother, who was happily watching a comedy on her large private screen, sipping a complimentary cognac. "Sharon," he whispered, his voice rough with shame. "Sharon, listen to me." She pulled off one of her noise-canceling headphones, annoyed. "What, David? I'm watching this." "I've been thinking," he whispered, glancing around to make sure no one could hear. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe this whole thing was a terrible mistake. Jade was trying to do something really nice for us. She was trying to share this with us." My mother's eyes turned to slits. Her face, which had been relaxed and happy, hardened into the cold, familiar mask of her anger. She did not whisper. Her voice was a low, vicious hiss that cut through the engine hum. "Shut up, David, just shut up." "You shut up," she repeated, leaning in close. "Wrong. She is our daughter. She is loaded with money. She owes us. After every single thing we did for her, raising her, feeding her, she owes her sister. Don't you ever take her side against your family again. Do you understand me?" David stared at her. He saw no love, no reason, only a deep, dark pit of resentment. He sank back into his expensive pod, defeated. He was trapped. Hours later, the pilot's voice came on. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final descent into Paris Charles de Gaulle." The moment that plane touched the tarmac, the very second the seatbelt sign pinged off, Chloe was a compressed spring. She ripped off her belt, shoved the coughing woman out of her way, and grabbed her bag from the overhead bin, hitting another passenger in the head. She did not apologize. She scrambled down the aisle, pushing past the other economy passengers. "Move! Get out of the way!" She forced her way into the business class cabin, then shoved aside the curtain to first class, where her parents were just politely starting to gather their things. "Mom, Dad, we're here!" she yelled, as if they were the only people on the plane. "Let's get out of this dump. I need a real drink." She pushed past them, elbowing a distinguished older gentleman out of her path, and became the first passenger at the door, vibrating with impatience. She was ready. She had endured the humiliation. Now it was time to cash in. Time for the limousines, the 5-star hotel, and the Instagram photos. She was completely blissfully and stupidly unaware of what was actually waiting for her on the other side of that door. Chloe burst through the automatic doors into the Charles de Gaulle arrivals hall first as if she were a celebrity. She had her phone out ready to record, expecting to see a uniformed driver holding a sign with her name on it. She stopped. "Where is he?" she demanded, looking around the crowded terminal. "Mom, where's the limousine driver?" "My mother." Sharon glided out after her, still radiating that first-class arrogance, her chin held high. "He will be here, Chloe. Calm down. He will have a sign. Washington. Just look for the sign." My father and Scott trailed behind, hauling all the heavy fake designer luggage, already sweating. My father looked nervous, overwhelmed by the chaos and the foreign signs. Scott just looked bored. My mother confidently scanned the row of drivers. She saw Smith. She saw Nguyen. She saw Diop. No Washington. "He's probably just late," Sharon said, her voice a little tighter than before. "Let's just wait over here." They stood awkwardly by a concrete pillar. 10 minutes passed. The crowds from their flight thinned out. Chloe's manufactured excitement was rapidly souring into her more natural state of petulant whining. "Mom, my feet hurt," she complained, dropping her carry-on bag dramatically. "This is so unprofessional. I knew Jade would mess this up. She probably booked some cheap car service to humiliate us. She's so jealous." 20 minutes. More drivers left as their clients arrived. The hall was becoming noticeably quieter. My father nervously cleared his throat. "Sharon, are you sure this is the right arrivals terminal? Maybe I should go to the information desk. They might be able to help." "No, David. You'll just get lost." My mother snapped, her authority absolute. "We will wait. He is coming. Jade booked it." She said booked, as if the word itself was a legal guarantee. 30 minutes passed. The last driver, a man holding a sign for Mr. and Mrs. Gupta, met his clients and they walked away laughing. And then there was no one. Just the three of them and Scott standing alone in the vast, echoing hall. They were completely, undeniably alone. The limousine was not coming. "That's it." My mother's voice was low and dangerous. She ripped her phone from her purse, her thumb stabbing at the screen. "I am calling Jade. I am going to give her a piece of my mind for this. This incompetence, stranding us in a foreign country." She pressed the phone to her ear, her entire body rigid with indignation, her foot tapping furiously on the polished floor. We can all imagine what she heard. The long transatlantic ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then click. The automated, cheerful voice of my voicemail greeting. "Hi, you've reached Jade. I can't take your call right now." My mother pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at it as if it had betrayed her. "What is it, Sharon?" my father asked, his voice trembling. "Voicemail." She spat the word like poison. "She sent me to voicemail." "Maybe she's in a meeting," my father offered weakly. "I don't care." Sharon shrieked, causing a passing security guard to look their way. She hit redial, jamming the phone back to her ear. Click, straight to voicemail. She tried again. Click, voicemail. She's not answering," my mother said, her voice no longer just angry. For the first time underneath the rage, there was a tiny cold spark of genuine panic. She was not in control. Chloe looked up from her phone, her pout collapsing into real fear. "What do you mean she's not answering, Mom? How are we supposed to get to the hotel? I don't even know the name of the hotel. How am I supposed to post my story?" My mother just stared at the silent phone in her hand. The realization was crashing down on all of them. They were in Paris. They did not speak the language. They had no money for a $14,000 ticket, let alone a hotel. They had no car. And the one person they had built their entire lives around, fixing their problems, was not picking up the phone. My mother, now in a full-blown panic, looked around wildly. The hotel. Jade must have told us the name of the hotel. David, think. My father, pale and sweating, just shook his head. I don't remember, Sharon. She said it was 5-star, that's all I know. Useless, my mother spat. Then an idea. She grabbed her phone, her thumbs flying, opening Google. I remember. That time she posted that picture, that trip 2 years ago. She was bragging about some fancy hotel in Paris. Le Bristol. That was it. She's obsessed with that place. She must have booked it again. She had a target. The entitlement and arrogance flooded back into her face. She marched to the front of the taxi line, shoved Chloe and my father into the back of a black Mercedes, and showed the driver the address on her phone. Le Bristol, she said as if she was a regular. And hurry up. The driver, seeing a loud, panicked American family with too much luggage, just smiled. I can picture them sitting in that taxi. The ride from Charles de Gaulle into the city is long, and they sat in simmering, toxic silence. Chloe was complaining about her phone battery. My mother was furiously texting my number again and again, watching the messages fail to deliver. My father was just staring out the window, watching the meter click higher and higher. When they arrived, the driver pulled up to the curb. That will be €120, he said. My mother's eyes bugged out. 100 and for a taxi. That's robbery. It is the price. Madame, the driver said, gesturing to the meter. My father, seeing a scene about to start, fumbled for his wallet and paid the man, his hand shaking as he handed over far more cash than he had planned. They tumbled out onto the curb, surrounded by their fake luggage, and stared. The hotel was not just a hotel. It was a palace. Uniformed dorm flowers erupted from vases that were taller than Chloe. The lobby was a masterpiece of antique furniture, crystal chandeliers, and a silence that spoke of old money. For a moment they were intimidated. This was a level of wealth they had only seen in movies. But my mother, Sharon, recovered first. She thought this was all for her. This was her reward. She puffed up her chest, grabbed Chloe's hand, and marched through the front doors as if she owned the place. She strode right up to the front desk, where an impeccably dressed, impossibly polite receptionist looked up and smiled. Bonjour, madame. How may I assist you? Check in. My mother announced, her voice too loud for the quiet lobby. The name is Washington. A reservation from Jade Washington. The receptionist smiled. Of course, Madam Washington. Let me just pull up your reservation. His fingers danced over the keyboard. He frowned just for a second. He typed again. I am so sorry, madame, he said, his voice full of professional regret. But the presidential suite reserved under Ms. Jade Washington's name, it was cancelled 24 hours ago. My mother's face went from smug to purple. Cancelled, she shrieked, slamming her hand on the polished marble desk. That is impossible. You check again. My daughter paid for this. It is all paid for. We flew first class. The receptionist did not flinch, though a nearby security guard subtly shifted his weight. I understand your frustration, madame, the receptionist said, his voice still perfectly calm, which only made my mother angrier. But you see, this was not a standard reservation. What are you talking about? My mother demanded. The receptionist looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and then he delivered the blow. Madame, this was a fully sponsored corporate package. It was provided by the Paris Luxury Summit. Your daughter, Ms. Jade Washington, is our keynote speaker. My mother's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Keynote. Speaker. What? What are you talking about? The receptionist continued, his voice still infuriatingly calm and polite. This entire package, madame. The first-class travel, the airport transfers, the presidential suite. It was all part of the invitation package for our guest of honor, Ms. Jade Washington. He looked at his screen again as if to confirm the details. Our system shows that Ms. Washington's original flight was cancelled from her end earlier today. As this entire package was linked to her attendance as the speaker, the system automatically cancelled all associated services. That includes the suite and, of course, the complimentary limousine service from the airport. He looked up at them with a look of professional sympathy. The invitation was strictly for the speaker and her registered travel companions. Since the speaker was no longer coming, the package was voided. My mother just stared, her mind unable to process the words. Keynote speaker, guest of honor. But my father finally understood. The blood drained from his face. He looked in that moment 10 years older. Oh my God, he whispered, his voice hoarse. He stumbled back, one hand gripping the edge of a velvet chair. Oh my God, Sharon! He looked at my mother, his eyes wide with a horrifying, complete understanding. This wasn't a vacation, Sharon. Don't you see? His voice was barely audible. This was her work. This was a business trip. She was being honored for something, and she invited us. She invited us to come with her. Chloe, however, was completely oblivious to the gravity of the situation. She was just angry and tired. So what? She snapped, crossing her arms. Who cares? So her room got canceled. Just book another one. I am not standing in this lobby all night. My feet are killing me. Mom, tell him to get us a new room. My mother, jolted by Chloe's voice, looked at the receptionist. Her face was pale, her arrogance shattered, replaced by a desperate, trembling panic. Fine, she whispered, her voice cracking. Just give us a room. What's the price? How much for just a regular room? For tonight. The receptionist's polite mask remained perfectly in place. He tapped a few keys. Of course, madame. Let me see what we have available. He paused. Ah, yes. We have one deluxe room available for this evening. The price for tonight is 3,500 euros. 3,500 euros. Complete, dead silence. My father looked like he was going to be sick. Chloe's jaw dropped, her demand for a new room dying on her lips. My mother just stared as if the receptionist had just slapped her. They did not have $3,500 in the world, let alone euros. They were. As the receptionist's words, 3,500 euros, echoed in the dead silence of the lobby, another person in the group finally snapped into action. Scott. His bravado, his family is about sharing attitude instantly evaporated. His eyes went wide and he took a visible, involuntary step backward, away from Chloe, away from my mother. He was like a rat, sensing the ship was not just sinking, but already at the bottom of the ocean. He stammered, pulling at the collar of his shirt. I think I should go check on the metro, the subway. I heard it's really cheap here in Paris. A good way to see the city, you know. He started to edge away, picking up his own cheap duffel bag. Chloe, seeing her boyfriend, her adoring audience, her accomplice trying to bolt, lunged at him. She grabbed his arm with both hands, her nails digging into his sleeve. Scott, where are you going? Her voice was no longer whining. It was a high-pitched, genuine shriek of panic. You can't leave me. You're not just going to leave me here, are you? Scott looked at her hands on his arm with pure disgust. He ripped his arm free of her grip, his face cold and hard. The nice guy, easygoing mask was completely gone. Listen, Chloe, he hissed, his voice low and fast. This is your family's drama. Okay, I came for a free trip. I did not come to be stranded. He gestured around the absurdly expensive lobby. I don't have 3,500 euros. That's like $4,000. I'm not paying for that. But what about me? Chloe wailed, her face crumbling. What about you? Scott scoffed. He adjusted the strap of his bag on his shoulder. You'll figure it out. Your sister will probably fix it. She always does, right? He did not wait for an answer. I'm gonna go find a hostel, a cheap one. I'm not getting stuck with your bill. And with that, he turned his back on her. He turned his back on my mother and father. He walked quickly across the stunning marble floor, past the towering flower arrangements, and straight out the front glass doors, disappearing onto the streets of Paris. He was gone. Chloe stared at the empty space where he had been. Her sister had abandoned her, Her parents were useless and powerless. And now her boyfriend had dumped her in the most humiliating way possible in front of God and the staff of the Le Bristol Hotel. It was too much. Her entire carefully constructed world of entitlement, built on the idea that someone else would always pay, always fix it, always put her first, completely shattered. Her knees buckled. And right there in the middle of the most opulent hotel lobby in Paris, my 31-year-old sister, the golden child, she sat down hard on the cold marble, put her head in her hands, and began to sob loud, ugly, gasping sobs of a child who had finally been told no. Chloe's sobs were not the quiet, delicate tears of a movie heroine. They were a raw, ugly, gut-wrenching spectacle. They were the sounds of a 31-year-old child who had just been denied the world, and they echoed sharp and jarring through the cathedral-like silence of the hotel lobby. In the adjoining lounge, I could picture it perfectly. A woman with silver hair wearing a string of real pearls paused with her teacup halfway to her lips, her expression one of pure, unadulterated disgust. A businessman reading Le Monde lowered his paper just to stare at the source of the disruption. This was Le Bristol, a place where the only acceptable sounds were the clinking of porcelain and the murmur of old money. Chloe's wailing was a violation. The receptionist, whose professional calm had been a fortress, finally let his smile fall. His job was to protect the ambiance, and my family was actively destroying it. He gave a short, sharp nod, almost invisible, to a tall man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, who had been standing seemingly at ease near the grand entrance. This was not a doorman. This was the hotel's head of security, a man whose entire career was based on making problems disappear. He did not rush. He glided across the marble, his steps silent, his presence radiating an authority that was far more intimidating than any weapon. He did not address Chloe, who was now just a heap of misery on the floor. He spoke directly to my mother, the one who was ostensibly in charge. He leaned in his voice just for her, but it carried the weight of an eviction notice. "Madame," he said, his English perfect, his French accent thick. "You and your family are causing a significant disturbance. Our other guests are trying to enjoy their afternoon. This is not acceptable." My mother, for the first time in her life, was completely out of her depth. Her usual tactics, the shouting, the demands, the "do you know who I am" bravado, were useless against this man. She was a minnow trying to threaten a shark. "My daughter," she pleaded, her voice cracking, her rage replaced by a pathetic, high-pitched whine. She is very upset. We had a misunderstanding." "I can see that, madame," the security man replied, his eyes as cold and flat as the marble beneath their feet. "Which is why I believe you would all be more comfortable outside." It was a masterpiece of polite, threatening language. He jested, not pointing but with an open-palmed motion toward the towering glass doors that led to the street. It was not a suggestion. It was an order. "I cannot allow you to remain in the lobby while your daughter is in this state," he continued. "It is a security matter. Please, you must leave now." But we have nowhere to go," my mother cried, the full desperation of their situation finally hitting her. The man's expression did not change. "That is not, if you will pardon me, the concern of the hotel. Your reservation was cancelled. You are not guests here." He then gave that same short nod to two uniformed doormen who had been watching. They stepped forward, their faces blank, and began picking up the cheap, heavy suitcases. They did not ask for permission. They just took them. "We will place your bags on the curb for you, madame," the security man said, effectively ending the conversation. "Please follow me." My father, his face ashen, his body shaking, looked like he was going to vomit. He stumbled forward and grabbed Chloe's arm, hauling her roughly to her feet. Chloe, too, shocked to even sob properly, just whimpered, her body limp as he half-dragged, half-carried her. My mother, speechless with a humiliation so profound it had stolen her voice, her entire identity as a powerful matriarch shattered, simply followed. I can see that walk, the walk of shame. The three of them led by the silent security guard across that magnificent sun-drenched lobby. They passed the elegant woman with the pearls, who pointedly turned her head away. They passed the businessman who watched them over the top of his newspaper with a look of cold amusement. They were trash. They were loud, poor American tourists who had been exposed and were now being taken out. The heavy glass doors opened with a silent, automatic whoosh. The two doormen placed the collection of fake Louis Vuitton bags on the sidewalk with a thud. "Bonjour, madame." One of them said, his tone perfectly polite, which somehow made the humiliation sting even more. The security guard stood in the doorway, a solid, unmoving wall. My father tried to look back, perhaps to plead one last time. "Sir, please." "Goodbye, monsieur," the guard said, and the doors glided shut, sealing them out, the click of the lock echoing the finality of their expulsion. They were standing on the curb of the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, one of the most expensive, exclusive streets on planet Earth. They were for all intents and purposes homeless. The sounds of Paris rushed in. The high-pitched peep of a nearby scooter. The rumble of a city bus releasing its air brakes. The smell of expensive perfume from a woman who brushed past them, her fur coat grazing my father's arm, and the smell of hot diesel exhaust. They were surrounded by life, by movement, by unimaginable wealth. And they were stranded. My father just kept muttering it. He leaned against a gilded lamppost, his hand over his heart, his breathing shallow. "A keynote speaker. She. He said it like he was trying to understand a foreign language, like the words themselves made no sense. Chloe had just collapsed onto one of the suitcases, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with those awful gulping sobs. She was a broken 31-year-old child, her mooching boyfriend gone, her fantasy vacation in ruins. But my mother, Sharon, after the initial paralyzing shock, felt something else take over. Pure, unadulterated survivalist panic. Her pride was gone, her humiliation was a luxury she could not afford. All that mattered was getting off this street. "Stop that, David," she hissed, her voice a low, ragged whisper. "Stop saying that. It doesn't matter. She tricked us. She set us up. She abandoned us, that's what matters. Now get yourself together. We just need a cheaper hotel. There has to be a Best Western or a Holiday Inn or something, somewhere for normal people." She looked at my father, her eyes desperate. "David." "Your wallet. Give me your wallet. How much cash do you have?" My father, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get his wallet out of his back pocket, fumbled with it. He opened the worn leather billfold. It was nearly empty. I don't know, Sharon," he stammered. I had to pay the taxi from the airport. The man charged 120 euros. It was almost all I brought." He pulled out the remaining bills. A 20, a 10, a few fives. "I only have maybe 60 euros left." 60? My mother hissed, her eyes wide with terror. 60 euros? That's not even enough for dinner. You came to Paris with less than 200 euros. You told me Jade was paying for everything." He defended himself, his voice weak. "You told me we wouldn't need any money." "Useless," she spat at him. She turned, her mind racing. It's fine, I'll use my card, I have my credit card. I'll use my own card." She clutched her purse to her chest like it was a life raft. "We'll find another taxi. We'll go back to the airport. There are always cheap hotels at the airport." She felt the need right then to prove she still had power, to prove she was not as broke and pathetic as she felt. She was still Sharon Washington. She saw a small green kiosk on the corner, the kind that sold newspapers and cold drinks. She marched over her heels, clicking angrily. She grabbed a bottle of Evian water from the cooler. She slammed it on the counter in front of the bored-looking vendor. "Just this," she snapped, pulling her wallet from her purse. She took out her Visa card, her good card, the one with the high limit, and pushed it at him. The vendor, without a word, took the card and ran it through his machine. A moment later, a high-pitched, irritating bzzzt sound. He looked at the screen, then at her. Declined. He said, his English thick. What? That's impossible. Run it again. Your machine is broken, she ordered. The vendor sighed, annoyed, and ran it a second time. Bzzz. He shook his head. Declined, madame. No. No. My mother snatched the card from his hand. She rubbed the magnetic strip furiously on her blouse as if polishing it would restore her credit. There are thousands of dollars on this card. I know it. Try it one more time. The vendor, his patience gone, ran it a third and final time. Bzzz, tea. He pushed the card back at her. Madame, the card, he said, tapping his own head. It is no good. Finished. You pay cash. And then the final horrifying realization hit her. The shopping, the trip to Saks last week, the new camel hair coat she'd bought, the one she was wearing, the 2 new pairs of shoes still in her luggage, the matching handbag. She had justified it all, telling herself she had to look perfect for her daughter's fancy Paris trip, that she couldn't look poor. She had maxed it out. She had maxed out every single cent, right up to the $30,000 limit, assuming Jade's money would cover the actual vacation. She had no cash. She had no credit. They had no hotel. They had no way to get a taxi. They had no way to even buy a €1 bottle of water. She stumbled back from the kiosk, the bottle of water still on the counter, the vendor staring at her with contempt. She staggered back to her family, a weeping daughter and a broken husband, on the most beautiful street in the world. She had one last option. Her hands shaking so badly she could barely control her fingers, pulled her phone from her purse. She fumbled with the screen, her vision blurred with panic. She stared at the contact name. Jade. Her pride, her anger, her entire life's identity she pressed the phone to her ear, her entire body trembling. She was expecting the click of voicemail. She was praying for the click of voicemail, just so she could scream at it. But this time, it rang, and then a click. It connected. Hello, Mom. My voice came through the speaker. It was not angry, it was not smug. It was just calm, collected, and impossibly clear. And from behind my voice, she could hear it, faintly but unmistakably. The sound of a string quartet playing classical music, the polite, happy murmur of a large crowd, and the gentle, celebratory, unmistakable clinking of champagne glasses. My mother's hand, the one holding the phone to her ear, was shaking so violently she could barely keep it there. She was staring at the impossible, beautiful building, a palace of light and warmth, while she stood in the cold, dark street. She was expecting voicemail. She was, Hello, Mom. My voice came through the speaker. It was not the voice of her daughter. It was not angry or scared or triumphant. It was just calm. It was collected, clear and steady. And behind my voice she could hear it, faintly but unmistakably, the sound of a string quartet playing classical music, the polite, happy murmur of a large, sophisticated crowd, and the gentle, celebratory, unmistakable clinking of champagne glasses. The sound of that party, the sound of the world she had just been physically ejected from, was like a match on gasoline. My mother's mind, already overloaded with panic and humiliation, simply shattered. Jade! She shrieked. It was not a word. It was a raw, primal scream that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with pure animal terror. Jade, you did this. You did this to us. I said nothing. I let her scream into the void. Where are you? She wailed, her voice cracking, hot tears of rage and self-pity streaming down her face. You tricked us. You played your own family. You abandoned us. I could hear her taking a ragged, sobbing breath, gearing up for the next volley. They kicked us out, Jade. The hotel. That man in the suit. He threw us out. He threw us out onto the street like we were garbage. Your own family. Your mother. Still, I said nothing. The faint, elegant sound of the string quartet continued from my end. "We have no money, do you hear me?" she screamed, her voice getting higher, cracking with hysteria. "No money. Your father. He has 60 euros. 60. And my card. My credit card. Jade. It. It's declined. It's declined. It's maxed out. It's all gone." The list of her catastrophes tumbled out. "And Chloe. Oh God, Chloe," she sobbed, turning to look at the weeping heap of her favorite child. She's just sitting here on the curb. She won't stop crying. And that boy, Scott, he left her. He just walked away. He's gone, Jade. He abandoned her. He abandoned your sister." She was sobbing so hard now the words were just wet, incoherent sounds. "You left us here. You left your family in Paris with no money and no hotel and no way home. How could you? How could you be so cruel? What did we ever do to you that was so bad? What did you do to us?" Her rant finally exhausted itself, collapsing into a series of wet, gasping sobs. The only sound from my end was the polite murmur of the crowd and the clinking of glasses. I let the silence stretch out, letting her accusations, her terror, her complete unraveling hang in the cold Paris air between the phone and her ear. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spoke. "Are you finished?" My voice, still so calm, so devoid of the drama she was drowning in, seemed to stun her into silence. "Good." I continued, my voice perfectly level. "First, I need you to stop screaming. You're causing a scene. People are starting to look." My mother sniffed, her brain foggy, confused. What are you talking about? Who can see me? Nobody can see me." I said simply. "I'm in Paris, Mom." "I know you're in Paris," she shrieked, the anger flaring up again instantly. "You're hiding in some other hotel. You're probably at the airport laughing at us. You set this all up." "No," I said, and this time my voice cut through the night sharp and clear. "I'm not in a hotel. I am in the hotel. I am standing in the main ballroom of the Le Bristol." I paused. I could almost feel her mind stop, her entire body freezing on that sidewalk. "I am at this very moment," I continued, standing by the grand staircase looking out the main window. I watched her, a small, pathetic figure on the curb. "I am about 50 meters away from where you, Dad, and Chloe are huddled on the sidewalk." My mother's hand, the one holding the phone, dropped to her side as if it had been struck by lightning. She just stood there, a statue on the cold sidewalk, her mouth open, her eyes wide, staring at the blazing floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel. From the street she could see it all, the impossible towering chandeliers, the blur of hundreds of people in elegant tuxedos and shimmering evening gowns mingling, laughing, holding those delicate champagne flutes. She could see the warmth, the light, the power. She could see the world she had been so desperate to be a part of. And she was on the outside in the dark, looking in like a beggar. My father, his face ashen, stumbled over. He was listening, his eyes locked on my mother's as she held the phone on speaker, her hand trembling so hard I was surprised she did not drop it. "That's right, Mom," I continued, my voice cold and clear, cutting through the silence of their "Do you finally understand? This was never a vacation. This was not a gift I bought for you. This was not about you or Dad or Chloe." I took a slow breath. This was an invitation. I was invited to Paris to be the keynote speaker at the Paris Luxury Summit. It is one of the most important brand events in the entire world. The CEOs of the companies you buy from, the designers whose bags Chloe tries to counterfeit, the investors who own half of Atlanta, they are all in this room, with me. My father made a small choking sound. "And tonight," I went on, "right now, I am at the grand gala dinner. In about 10 minutes I am scheduled to walk up onto that stage, the one you can probably see from the street, and I am supposed to accept the Global Brand Strategist of the Year award." The silence on their end was so complete, so absolute, I could hear a single siren wailing miles away in the Paris. David and Sharon Washington from the suburbs of Atlanta had no frame of reference for this. Their successful daughter was not just a manager, she was an honored guest. That invitation package, I said, spelling it out for them as if they were children. The one that was voided. It included everything. It included 3 first-class tickets on Air France so my parents could fly with me. It included the presidential suite for 1 week so my parents could stay with me. It included a private limousine service for our entire stay, so my parents would never have to wait for a car. And it included 2 seats right at the front table for this gala, this exact party, so my parents could watch me be honored. My father's breathing was ragged. "Jade," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Jade, we didn't know. We didn't understand." "No," I said, and for the first time a tremor of my own pain, my own stupid, naive hope broke through my voice. "You didn't. You never did." I was so excited," I whispered, hating myself for it. I was so stupidly excited. I had this whole scene planned in my head. I was going to have my parents, my family sitting right there at the front table. I was going to stand on that stage in front of all those powerful, important people, and I was going to thank you. I was going to thank you and Dad for everything. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. I was going to thank you for teaching me resilience, even though you just called it being difficult. I was going to thank you for teaching me independence, even though you just called it being selfish. And then, I said, taking a deep breath to steady myself, I was going to give you the real gift, the real reason I wanted you here. What gift? My father stammered. The money, Dad. I just received my annual bonus from my company, $150,000. I let that number land. $150,000. More than he made in 2 years. And the very first thing I did with that bonus, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, the moment it hit my account last week, was I paid off your mortgage, the entire remaining balance on your house. I was going to hand you the paid-in-full document right here in Paris at this dinner. I was going to give you the house, free and clear, no more payments, ever. That was supposed to be my grand gesture. That was the moment I was finally going to make you proud. Jade. My father's voice was a desperate, broken whisper, a last pathetic plea from a man who had just understood the scale of what he had lost. Jade, wait. Please. What? What are we supposed to do? We have no money. We have no way home. Please, please, Jade. Help us. Just tell us what to do. I looked through the thick, soundproof glass of the ballroom window. I saw him, a hunched, gray-looking man clinging to a phone on a cold sidewalk. I saw my mother staring, catatonic, her face a mask of ruin. I saw my sister, a weeping heap on a pile of luggage. Her life's bill finally come due. All my life I had waited for this. For them to need me. For them to finally see me. To finally ask me for help. To finally realize my worth. And now here it was. The moment I had dreamed of. And I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. The part of me that had craved their approval, that had ached for their love, that part had died in the driveway in Atlanta. That $150,000 bonus, Dad, I said, my voice quiet, completely void of emotion. The money I was going to use to pay off your house. I just decided what to do with it. Yes, he gasped, his voice filled with a sudden desperate hope. Yes, Jade. I'm going to call my financial advisor tomorrow morning, I said, and I'm going to have him move all of it into a new irrevocable trust fund. A fund just for me, for my future. You always told me to be smart with my money. I'm finally taking your advice. No, he whispered. Jade, you can't. You wanted Chloe to have a vacation, I said. You said she needed a rest. Well, she has it now. I could hear the polite applause starting in the ballroom behind me. A man's voice, the event's CEO, was walking toward the stage. I have to go now, Dad, I said. They're calling my name. Jade? Wait, don't hang up, Jade. I pressed the red icon on my screen. I ended the call. I turned off my phone. I slipped the slim dark rectangle into my evening bag. I took a deep cleansing breath. The toxic heavy chain that had bound me to them for 34 years simply fell away. I was light. A distinguished older gentleman with kind eyes and a warm smile approached me. It was Jacques, the CEO of the summit. He offered me his arm. Ms. Washington, are you ready? He asked, his voice full of genuine respect and admiration. I looked past him at the stage. It was bathed in a warm, brilliant white light. I could see the Crystal Award sitting on a small podium. I could hear the buzz of 500 of the most powerful people in my industry all waiting for me. For my entire life I had been the scapegoat, the afterthought, the ATM, the one who was too serious and too ambitious, not like us. I had spent my life shrinking myself, desperately trying to earn a seat at a table where I was never ever welcome. Tonight I realized I had been building my own table all along, and it was a banquet. I smiled at Jacques, a real smile, a smile that reached my eyes for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. Yes, I said, my voice clear and strong. I am. I took his arm and walked toward the light. I walked onto that stage, and the applause that erupted was deafening. It was not for Sharon's daughter. It was not for Chloe's sister. It was for me, Jade Washington. I had finally completely and absolutely chosen myself. The phone call ended. The line went dead. My father David stood on the cold curb staring at the small, dark screen in his trembling hand. My mother Sharon was completely catatonic, her eyes wide and blank, staring at the magnificent blazing windows of the hotel she had been thrown out of. Chloe had finally stopped her loud, ugly sobs. She was now just a heap, whimpering quietly, her face buried in the sleeve of her cheap coat, sitting on her fake luggage. From the dark street, they could see it all. Through the thick, soundproof glass, they saw the silhouettes of hundreds of people. They saw the impossible chandeliers glittering like trapped stars. And then they saw her, my silhouette. A tall, elegant, powerful shape in a dark dress, stepping onto the brilliantly lit stage. They could not hear the applause, but they could see the entire room turn, hundreds of faces looking at me, at my shadow. They stood there, the three of them, a pathetic, broken little island of their own making, stranded on the curb. They were in the cold, in the dark, with 60 euros and a maxed-out credit card. They had been given a chance to enter that world. A chance to sit at the front table, to be celebrated, to be gifted a life free of debt. They had been handed a golden ticket, a winning lottery number. And they had not just thrown it away. They had torn it up, spat on it, and set it on fire, all for the sake of their own jealousy, their own petty cruelty, and their blind, stupid devotion to the daughter who gave them nothing. Now they were just three broke, humiliated American tourists abandoned on a Paris street. They had no hotel, they had no money, they had no return tickets. Their only option, their only logical next step, was to find a police officer, to be taken to a shelter, and to wait until morning. To then make the humiliating journey to the United States Embassy, to beg for an emergency loan, and to be flown home in disgrace on the government's dime. They had wanted a vacation. They had wanted Chloe to rest. Instead, they had earned a lesson in consequences, a lesson they would be paying off for the rest of their miserable lives. This story teaches that your value is not determined by those who treat you as an option. True liberation comes when you stop seeking approval from people who are blinded by their own entitlement and jealousy. By investing in yourself instead of endlessly chasing their validation, you reclaim your power. Family is not a lifelong excuse for disrespect. Setting boundaries and protecting your success is the ultimate act of self-worth. The greatest payoff is not revenge, but finally choosing yourself. Have you ever had to be the bad guy to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below and hit that subscribe button